Okay, we are now in the final section of this video. And again, you're going to notice that they're all divided out uh, into single topics. And that is the emotional roots that go along with physical symptoms. And this may or may not be new to you, but if you sign up for the Healing Frequencies Music newsletter, the website link is below, then you will eventually get the emotional roots of physical symptoms chart that myself and Seneca from Freedom Flowers and Alice, um, I can't remember, it's alicearlene.com, um, that we all put together um, to do with the emotional roots of physical symptoms. Now, I first discovered this through a naturopath, believe it or not, because we have a spirit, we have a soul, we have a body. They are meant to work together harmoniously. If the soul, which is where your emotions lie, is like all the time, anger, frustrated, then your body is going to take a hit. It settles in your body eventually. And one of the first things that I always heard from the naturopath was, if you're dealing with bitterness, the first place you're going to see it is in your joints. And where there's stiffness, I can't remember what they call that, and they ache and everything. And I thought, well, that's really weird. Why would bitterness settle there? It's like anything else. Why would frustration, or why would anger, or why would uh, not liking yourself or feeling rejected, those are going to settle in, they tend to settle in the same places. And I'm like, well, that seems kind of strange. But what I found, I had suffered a really strange illness, which was, I talk about in the book, But Words Will Never Hurt Me. It's my memoir, and I wouldn't recommend reading the book unless you've been through some kind of an abusive situation. And even if you have, you're ready to read it. Because I know a friend of mine gave the book to someone, and she got halfway through it. She goes, "This is too intense. I can't handle this." But she was too much in the situation and not ready to see what was going on. But it was in that situation that I got really sick. And my husband was a naturopath and was giving me stuff. And this is one of the reasons why I always tell people, you have to be very careful with whatever nutritional supplements that you're taking, because just because the world says this is good for you, or some naturopath says this is good for you, does your body want it? And I'm not going to go into any of the other details here. You're going to have to read it in the book. But I got really sick to the point where I wasn't sure I was going to make it through it. But at the same time, in the midst of that, I started dealing with some real emotional struggles. And even after leaving the marriage, this sickness wouldn't go away. Even after I quit taking all the supplements, by then it had, because my emotional state was such a wreck. And it was really interesting. I noticed that when I began dealing with some of the emotional ickies, it's a good way of describing it, ickies, the emotional baggage and the stuff that came with all of that, because when you're in a situation where someone's always treating you like a piece of dirt, then you're not necessarily going to feel good about yourself. You're going to feel rejected. You're going to feel a bunch of other things. So as I began to work through that, one day I was like, wait a minute, I'm starting to feel better. And I was having less and less issues, but it was such a gradual process that I think it took me a few months to realize, hey, wait a minute, I'm not suffering any symptoms anymore. But by then, I had changed my thought processes, transformed my mindset enough that I was no longer living out of rejection. I was no longer living out of fear. I was no longer living out of any of those things that had been brought in. And I wasn't doing anything other than dealing with the emotional stuff, because I'd quit taking all the things. I wasn't taking any medications from a doctor, but I still had these really strange physical symptoms. And when that happened, I'm like, there's got to be something to the fact that emotional roots will cause a physical problem. So if you're listening to this and you're someone who the doctors can't figure out what the heck's going on, because I went and had a complete physical and they could not figure, everything looked good. So if you've gone and they can't figure anything out, chances are you might be like me in that you had your physical symptoms were a direct result of emotional junk that needs to be adjusted. And as I've been saying in this whole time, we have to be willing to put to practice what it is we want. It was probably 15 years after the marriage before I had complete healing. But part of the issue was I had gone from an abusive husband to an abusive boss. So it was 5 years after I left that situation before the healing finally completed. It's not that I wasn't in the process before, but I always felt like I was on edge. And anytime that you feel like you're on edge, you have to look at your emotions. What's going on? How do I fix this? But if we're not practicing shifting the mindset to think something different, then it's going to be really tough. And I know that's not easy. And it's, like I would tell my students, here's your recital music. You're starting from scratch and you have to play this music and pass the recital so you can graduate. It's the same thing. You're taking baby steps. And what I had to learn to do was rejoice at every small step that was in the right direction. And I did not kick myself when I did something wrong. There's another key. So in this process of dealing with the emotions that cause the physical roots, you may be dealing with the physical roots for quite a while. Because it takes your body some time to say, hey, wait a minute, what's going on up there? As it looks at a healed soul and a healed spirit and says, wait a minute, I like what I see. Okay, now I can come into alignment underneath that. That's what happened with me. And I am, older now, obviously, but in a lot of ways, I'm healthier. And I attribute it to the fact that I was willing to look at the emotional roots of these physical symptoms and deal with them. And you have to be at a place where you're ready to do that. And if you are ready to do that, I encourage you to sign up for the newsletter. And sometime within the first couple months, I can't remember which one, you'll get a link. Well, you have to click on links to get coupons to download things. And once you do that, then you get the whole chart. And you can look at the things and it shows you at flower essences, music essences, and a healing protocol that could help you work through whatever issues that you're dealing with. So that is just a little tiny bit about the emotional roots of physical symptoms and how that if you're struggling with things, that consider trying it out and see if it works for you. It worked for me, and I think it could help for you too. All right. We will end this series and we'll see what the next one brings. Depends on what questions people ask. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to put them in the chat below. And who knows, I might turn it into a video. All right. See you later and have a bodaciously splendiferous day.